In Washington, D.C., amongst the politicians and historical monuments, nestled in the quiet suburbs surrounding the district, lies a vibrant Bolivian community that has managed to create a space for themselves where they are able to maintain cultural practices and establish social networks that help recent immigrants adjust to life in Metropolitan Washington. How are Bolivian immigrants able to adjust to life in the United States? How did this relatively small group of immigrants from South America create their own space where they can continue traditions from back home? While they're not easily visible to most, one could catch a glimpse of these Bolivian spaces by going to athletic fields in Northern Virginia over the weekend. If you were to go to a basketball court during a November afternoon back in 2001, you would see a statue of Saint Savino, the patron saint of Tarata, enclosed in a glass box and surrounded by flowers. The altar contrasts with the basketball hoop behind it, but this county park was where Bolivians were able to celebrate their village's religious ceremonies. This particular ceremony took place during the last Liga Tarata game of the season, and it was accompanied by a performance from local folkloric dance groups to honor the same. This celebration shows just how important soccer leagues were to the Bolivian community in establishing these spaces that allow them to continue traditions from back home while also adjusting to life in the United States. In order to better understand the creation and impact of these soccer leagues, it is important to first look at the migration of Bolivians to the United States. Since the 1960s, there has been significant growth in the U.S. foreign-born population. In 1960, the number of Latin Americans in the U.S. was 1 million. In 2010, it was nearly 19 million. While the number of Latin Americans increased, the source countries have also become more diverse. When it comes to Bolivians, the first group arrived to Arlington, Virginia in the 1960s. This was mostly a small number of professionals and students whose parents could afford to send them to another country. But then in the 1980s, larger numbers of Bolivians arrived as a result of numerous job opportunities and limited competition from other Latino immigrants in the area. They crossed the U.S.-Mexican border or obtained visas through the United States' chain migration policies. According to data from the U.S. Census Bureau, from 1980 to 1990, the Bolivian community in Washington tripled in size, and it only continued to grow from there. Despite the increasing population, there has never been a distinct Bolivian enclave. The rising number of immigrants from other countries and the tight housing market resulted in Bolivian immigrants being spread out wherever they could find affordable housing. Oftentimes, this would be apartments. Without a physical place Bolivians could call their own, they created their own spaces, and one of the ways of doing that was through the creation of Bolivian soccer leagues. According to Washington Post reporter Gabriel Escobar, in 1998, there were more than 30 Latino leagues that were made up of over 450 teams. One of these leagues was INCOPEA, or the Incorporación del Pueblo de Esteban Acre. The INCOPEA League was founded in 1991, and it began with 6 teams. The league was set up so that different teams represent different villages in the Valle Alto region of Cochabamba, Bolivia. Since the league replicates rural village structures, it was mostly closed off to players that did not have those connections to the Valle Alto. Part of the reason why the league was strict with residential ties to the villages was because INCOPEA's mission, according to the league president in 2000, was to help their communities back in Bolivia. The league did this by sending the villages money that they collected from players' dues and from selling concessions at game. And this money was then spent on improving schools, churches, and town plazas. While its primary mission may have been to help communities back in Bolivia, INCOPEA also created both physical and cultural space for Bolivian immigrants in the United States. In 1990, Fairfax County officials were receiving complaints from residents about Latino teams taking over the fields. Once INCOPEA was founded, it was able to deal with the county bureaucracy and obtain permits for the soccer fields, securing a physical space for Bolivians to gather. The leagues also cultivated the fields into a cultural space. Most INCOPEA matches were held on Sundays, and it was the one time a week that Bolivian families could come together and speak Quechua, eat traditional foods, and catch up with friends they are unable to see throughout the week. Most of the players were men in their 20s and 30s who mostly worked in the construction industry, including men who arrived with a college education. They typically worked long hours, 5 to 6 times a week. Undocumented Bolivian immigrants especially lived a restrictive life in the Washington area. They lived among a small circle of close family and friends, trying not to draw too much attention to themselves. These immigrants cannot go back to visit their homes. For many, it has been 15 to 20 years since they have seen family members back in Bolivia. The space created by INCOPEA helped these recent immigrants because it allowed them to connect with people who have been living in the United States longer and who could inform them about different job opportunities in the area. But more importantly, for Bolivians unable to go back to their hometowns, soccer became a way to construct a shared memory of a place. Bolivian immigrants essentially recreated their villages, recreated Bolivia in Metropolitan Washington. This space was then introduced to a new generation of Bolivian Americans. The soccer fields became a place where the kids of Bolivian immigrants could experience the traditions of their parents' hometowns. The various Bolivian restaurants, folkloric dance groups, and celebrations that exist within the Metropolitan Washington area today are a result of soccer leagues like INCOPEA, creating a physical and cultural space for Bolivian immigrants to come together and create a community.